China just gave a quiet but earth-shaking order to its banks. Stop using the US dollar. No headline, no warning. But in a single directive, the world's second-largest economy sent a clear message. It's done playing by Washington's rules. Markets trembled. Diplomats scrambled. And behind it all, one unmistakable truth emerged. China isn't listening to the United States anymore. Especially not to Donald Trump. After years of enduring sanctions, chip bans, blacklists, and tariffs, Beijing is no longer on the defensive. This isn't a trade dispute. This is economic warfare. And now it's entering a far more dangerous phase. The US isn't just trying to block Chinese goods from its shelves. It's going for the jugular, China's connection to the global financial system. Just weeks ago, American officials quietly leaned on the Asian Development Bank to stop issuing loans to China. The justification? China's no longer poor enough to deserve special treatment. But in Beijing, it wasn't just seen as a snub. It was an insult. The gloves are off. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent didn't stop with the ADB. He's targeting the IMF and the World Bank. Global institutions meant to support developing nations, now being repurposed to push Washington's agenda. Standing before a crowd of international investors, Bessent didn't mince words. He said these institutions are too focused on distractions like climate and gender issues, not doing what the US wants fast enough. Translation: fall in line, or lose US support. But even as Bessent tried to sell Washington's vision with a polished tone, his own president was tearing it all down. Hours later, Donald Trump stormed on stage and threw gasoline on the fire, threatening fresh tariffs on any country that steps out of line. For America's allies and rivals alike, this was not leadership. This was coercion. This was economic bullying dressed as diplomacy. Tariffs rise one day, they're delayed the next. No one, not governments, not companies, not markets, can predict the next move from Washington. It's chaos. And that chaos is driving nations to ask, do we really want to keep depending on the US? Because here's the thing. As the US tries to box China out, China is quietly building something bigger, stronger, global. Despite pressure from Washington, China's international partnerships are not just holding, they're expanding. In a bold move, the Qatar Investment Authority took a 10% stake in China Asset Management Company, a massive show of confidence from the Middle East. In Southeast Asia, trade with the ASEAN bloc surged to $234 billion in the first quarter. And then there's the Belt and Road Initiative. Once dismissed by critics as overambitious, it now counts nearly 150 nations. Highways, railways, ports. China is stitching together an alternative global system, one that doesn't depend on the dollar or the West. But none of this would matter without one crucial advantage: China's industrial might. As of 2024, manufacturing still drives 26% of China's economy. And that engine now churns out nearly a third of the world's goods. No country on Earth can match China's scale in making, building, producing. This industrial base sits atop an economic colossus. In raw numbers, China's 2025 GDP is estimated at $19.2 trillion, second only to the US. But when measured by purchasing power, Beijing has already taken the crown, $40.7 trillion. The world's largest economy by real output. That kind of scale doesn't just generate wealth. It generates leverage, influence, power. And while Washington tries to isolate Beijing through financial warfare and diplomatic pressure, the reality is clear. China isn't shrinking. It's not retreating. It's recalibrating, preparing for a world where it no longer needs permission from Washington to lead. The US can try to slow it down, but stopping it? That might already be out of reach. Resilience is a cornerstone of American identity. It's what built skyscrapers from steel, launched rockets into orbit, and forged the most powerful economy in human history. But resilience alone isn't enough. Not when the industrial core that once powered the United States is now fading. While China pushes forward, scaling the heights of manufacturing and innovation, the US is slipping into retreat. Today, manufacturing accounts for just 10.3% of the American economy, the lowest it's been since the Second World War. This isn't just a statistical trend. It's a tectonic shift. And it's one that has sent shockwaves through Washington. Because when a country loses its factories, it doesn't just lose jobs. It loses leverage. It loses the tools of self-reliance. And in a world increasingly defined by technology, logistics, and supply chains, it may even lose its ability to defend itself. China saw this coming years ago. And it didn't wait. In 2015, Beijing unveiled a bold strategy, Made in China 2025. Not a slogan, a doctrine. A plan to break free from its past as the world's low-cost assembly line and rise as a global tech and manufacturing superpower. Its targets were clear. Dominate next-gen industries, electric vehicles, aerospace, robotics, semiconductors, AI, biotech, and more. This wasn't just ambition. Today, China produces over 60% of the world's electric vehicles. It's the #1 exporter of solar panels. In 2023 alone, it deployed more than 300,000 industrial robots, outpacing every other nation. Its factories aren't just large, they're smart, fast, integrated, orchestrated with government-backed funding, ultra-low interest loans, and master-planned industrial zones that operate like machines within machines. Meanwhile, the U.S., despite its economic size, now manufactures just 16% of the world's goods. The gap is no longer theoretical. It's visible, tangible, and growing. And here's the twist. China's rise isn't being powered by cheap labor anymore. In cities like Shenzhen and Guangzhou, factory workers now earn wages comparable to those in Eastern Europe. It's not what they pay, it's what they've built. Mega factories that can pivot on a dime. Entire cities engineered around efficiency, ports, roads, and supply chains. In China, you can go from blueprint to product in days. In the West, that same process might take weeks or months. This industrial agility has become China's strategic weapon. And it's not just threatening U.S. market share, it's threatening U.S. global dominance. American leaders are deeply alarmed, not only because China is gaining ground, but because it's doing so in sectors critical to national security. Semiconductors, AI systems, military hardware, hypersonics, and that fear has turned into action. President Donald Trump launched the first salvo. Tariffs soared as high as 245%. Billions in subsidies were deployed to lure manufacturers back home. The goal, decouple, isolate, rebuild a self-sufficient industrial base and protect American power. But it didn't stop China. It barely slowed it down. Huawei, once paralyzed by U.S. chip bans, is now producing its own advanced processors inside China. BYD, once seen as a distant EV competitor, has surpassed Tesla in sales and is entering new markets across Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Chinese solar and battery companies are setting up factories abroad to avoid tariffs, outmaneuvering restrictions with speed and scale. So the question grows sharper. Can America actually separate from China? The reality is complex, because America isn't just dealing with China. It's dealing with itself and its allies. Germany, Japan, South Korea, even Canada, all deeply embedded in Chinese supply chains. German carmakers rely on Chinese components. Japanese electronics firms need Chinese fabs. These are not casual partnerships. They are dependencies. China's trade continues to swell. In 2024, it exported nearly $3.6 trillion in goods. Its trade surplus? A staggering $1 trillion. That surplus isn't just an economic number. It's a political force. It's leverage. It's reach. And while Washington builds economic walls, China is building something far more dangerous. And through its Belt and Road Initiative, China is laying down highways, ports, rail lines, and fiber optic cables across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It's not just building infrastructure, it's building loyalty, alliances, escape routes from the US-led world order. History has a lesson here. When a rising power is cornered economically, it rarely submits. It adapts, it innovates, or it fights. Now a new front opens, one not fought with steel or silicon, but with currency. China is challenging the dollar itself. In a major strategic move, the People's Bank of China raised the minimum threshold for yuan-based trade from 25% to 40%. This isn't a footnote. It's a turning point. Today, only 30% of China's nearly $8 trillion in trade is settled in yuan. But if banks hit the new mandate, over $3 trillion will bypass the dollar annually. That's not a symbolic gesture. That's an earthquake. A shift of that scale would shake the foundations of the global financial system. It would boost demand for the yuan, pull capital into Chinese markets, and reduce China's exposure to dollar-based sanctions. Goldman Sachs projects that even a 1% increase in the yuan could lift Chinese stocks by 3%. And every dollar moving east is a dollar not propping up U.S. bonds or equities. This isn't just currency policy. It's economic warfare, and it's escalating fast. Because now, China is aiming for the crown jewels of American innovation. In the auto market, BYD has declared a price war, slashing EV prices by 10% to 30%. For Elon Musk's Tesla, this is a nightmare. In Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, Chinese EVs are flooding the streets, cheaper, faster, and increasingly more advanced. But this isn't just about who sells more cars. This is about who controls the future of mobility, of energy, of data, of artificial intelligence. Chinese companies, backed by massive state support and strategic patience, are laying the groundwork for dominance, not just in products, but in platforms, standards, and systems. From smart cities to 6G networks to quantum computing, Beijing isn't playing catch-up anymore. It's setting the pace. This isn't a defensive crouch. This is a counteroffensive. Total, integrated, and relentless. From trade to tech, from currency to capital flows, China is reshaping the rules. And what it's building isn't a shield against American pressure. It's a replacement for the global system that America built. And the world is watching. So the question, now more urgent than ever, isn't whether China can withstand U.S. pressure. It's whether the rest of the world is willing to follow China into a new economic order.